my parents are pretty much the same as parents the world over. And if you're a parent, you probably are doing the same thing. What you do is you tell people, you tell your offspring, your children, look, just do the right thing, try hard, it'll all work out. So you propagate this myth of meritocracy. So
Mm.
I grew up that way, and then I became an engineer. So obviously an engineer is kind of 1+1=2. There's a set of black and white rules for how the world works. And I think over time, working in business, I just slowly discovered that does not work.
Welcome to 99 Humans. My name is Jeff LaCosta, curious coach and Wall Street Journal best-selling author, striving to understand how little things generate big impact.
And I'm Nadia Carta, tech executive and lifestyle coach with a mission to transform lives and corporations by kindling hearts to generate a zeal for life.
Each week, we investigate stories about the human side of leadership to re-energize your spirit and help you become a stronger leader.
Because the reality is that leadership is messy, goofy, challenging, but always human.
Thanks for spending time with us today. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome to 99 Humans and our 99th episode today, where I am joined by the incredible Gavin McMahon, the CEO of Fassforward, a company focused on leadership and storytelling, and the author of the new book, Story Business, Why Stories Rule the World and How They Can Reinvent Your Business. Gavin, thank you so much for joining the show. Where does this podcast find you today in the world?
Thank you so much for having me. I am based in Connecticut, although from my accent, it doesn't sound like I'm from here.
That's right. Well, we were just talking about your British roots and my sort of love for the UK after doing a master's degree in Leeds and then interning at the House of Commons, which was a little bit of an adventure here. So to get a taste of British politics compared to US.
Yeah, politics the world over. It's
Yes. Well, congratulations on the new book. I know this has been a big success. For folks who may not know you, would you mind just sharing a little bit about how you found your way into writing a book about the power of storytelling, which is something that a lot of us who are believers in the human power of leadership naturally, I think, lend ourselves to agree with you. But how did you come to this topic?
So, I introduced myself through this idea of a 6-word story, lapsed engineer now tinkers with brains. The lapsed engineer part is I used to be an engineer, mechanical engineer. I worked in the defense industry. I worked in Africa. And then eventually through a series of, career, decisions, ended up working at Gartner and then ended up coming over to the States. Fassforward, the company that I helped to found, has been around for nearly 25 years. And what we do is we work with large companies, really helping them through change. And that could be translating strategy, that could be shaping culture, that could be lifting teams. But at the end of the day, all of that comes down to people. And I find, and I think, people are going to make decisions, and the biggest influencer of the decisions they make are the stories they tell themselves. So I think understanding storytelling is huge, and that led me to writing a book about it.
Absolutely agree with you. And I think the premise behind 99 Humans being all about, getting behind the facade of what we think leadership is or what it might look like on earnings calls. That was always my big thing. I'm
Yeah.
like, man, these people sound so impressive on earnings calls. Like, what's really going on? And hearing stories about them spilling coffee in their lap while they're reading out their reports. Like, those are the things that make it feel approachable and human and real to me. But I'm curious what the spark was for you, because you found something that obviously is a kernel of truth that's allowed you to build a successful business for a long time and write an amazing book that's succeeding out in the world. But how did you learn this lesson? Or did you just always know that storytelling was where it was really at?
No, I don't think so. And I also don't think, I imagine, I've never done it, but I imagine if you write a biography or you're writing a movie of some famous event, you've got to find the starting point. And I think the problem with that is there never is one single starting point. There are multiple different things. So I'll tell you a few of them. One is, I think my parents are pretty much the same as parents the world over. And if you're a parent, you probably are doing the same thing. What you do is you tell your offspring, your children, look, just do the right thing, try hard, it'll all work out. So you propagate this myth of meritocracy. So I grew up that way, and then I became an engineer. So obviously an engineer is kind of 1 + 1 = 2. There's a set of black and white rules for how the world works. And I think over time, working in business, I just slowly discovered that does not work. It's never.
Can you remember one of those times? Because I remember times in my career where I'm like, what the hell? It was supposed to go like this, but it went like that instead.
Well, one of the, and it seems like a really strange thing. So I was running this factory in Africa, and I was
Where in Africa?
Temporary.
I've spent some time there.
Yeah, I know. But I was running this temporarily. I was there for 6 months as the kind of locum general manager, and the auditors came in, so accountants. So I was fairly young. I was in my late 20s, and an engineer. So I knew how the plant worked. I knew how everything worked in the factory, but this kind of strange finance stuff, that was weird to me. So these auditors from Coopers and Lybrand came, and they started walking around the factory, and I was showing them all the bits and pieces. And then they went into the stores, and they were looking at, and there were, baskets of machine parts and other tools. And, there were literally bolts in boxes in this machine shop. And I said, well, and they were doing an audit. So they were counting all the stuff. And I said, well, here's the boxes. And they looked at the boxes and, yeah, that's right. I said, do you not want to open them? Do you not want to, you don't want to count how many there are actually in there? No, it's roughly right. And I always had this vision in my head that, well, if you're accounting, you're just counting everything, and it's all got to work. But this idea that it's all roughly working, that was kind of one of the starting points. And then I think, I think also during that time, we had a plan for how the factory would work and what it would produce. And, eventually over time, it became way more productive. But a lot of that was due to people just doing things by accident and then discovering that there was a better way to do something. And so I just think companies generally are people coming together, trying to genuinely do their best, not necessarily knowing what they're doing or how they're doing it, but they rub along. And if you can get everyone lined up, it's a great thing. If everyone can understand how they contribute to creating value, it's a great thing. And the best way to do that, the best way to line people up is through stories.
Yeah, I believe that. And so what about stories is making people line up, I guess? Or if I'm somebody who wants this, but maybe it's not happening for me, right? Like I'm trying my best, but maybe the story isn't connecting. I'm not finding the right materials to make it work. What tips do you have for making those stories as effective as they can be?
Okay, so I'll answer that question in two parts. I'll come to the tip part second.
Okay.
I think, first of all, I know this is not a podcast about TV show streaming recommendations, but I do have one. And
so nice. Okay. I'll always take it.
There's a TV show called Dark. It's a German TV show. It's on Netflix. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but there's a line in that movie or in that TV show, which is the truth is the story we tell. Now, I extend that line slightly to say the truth is the story we tell ourselves. And I think that is true. I think we all have stories running in our heads about who we are, what we do, why we're good, why we're bad, all of that. And they are stories we tell ourselves. And I think if you can intercept those stories as you work with other people, if you can start to tweak and change those stories, that's really useful, because really how we are wired is through the stories we tell ourselves. So I'll come to tips. I think the best way to get started is to pay attention to what moves you. People are, you automatically, you're making subconscious or unconscious decisions most of the time. And if you stop and think for a minute about why you did that, why is it you press that button? Why is it that you like this thing? And I tend to do that a lot. I don't know, maybe it's the engineer in me that does that. But I think if you pay attention to why something sticks with you, why you're attracted to something, it's interesting. So I'll give you an example. For when I first moved over to the States, I'd be getting in a cab from Grand Central in New York to go somewhere. And it really annoyed me because I'd come over from a country that was then a lot more used to credit cards, that I could not get a credit card out and pay the cabbie. The cabbie always wanted cash. This is pre all the systems they have today.
Even still, when it happens, it's infuriating.
Yeah.
Right?
So then fast forward a few years later, and you're rolling out all these payment systems where you just swipe the cab now, and you've got Uber coming out and everything else. I think that the design of the tipping systems are really interesting because, again, coming from the UK, I want to pay with a credit card, and I'm not used to tipping because in the UK, no tips. In the US, everyone tips. But then the calculation, the math is actually quite hard for me. I'm like, okay, so I can do 10%. I just have to shift a decimal over. 20%, that's a little bit harder because I have to shift a decimal over and double it. And then 15%, that's really, that's too much math. I can't do that. So it's just that here's another $5, keep the change, right? And I think that's the way most people do it. And this is why cabbies were so resistant to, we don't want credit cards in our thing. Also, maybe for tax purposes, they didn't want they wanted to keep cash. But what's interesting now, and again, this comes back to what do you pay attention to? Now I swipe a cab card and I see these tipping, 10%, 20%, 30%. And I almost always press the middle button because I don't want to, why do I do that? And I'm not saying I'm the same as everyone, but I do it because I don't want to be super cheap. And I also don't want to, pay too much for the tip. And I don't really want to pay attention to it. So I press the middle button. But the middle button is generally way more than the old hand calculated, this is cash way. So cabbies are very happy. But anyway, I think that's a little story about why do we pay attention to things. If you want to get better at storytelling, pay attention to what you pay attention to and why you pay attention to it.
I really like that tip because it feels universally true and it has a ton of room for interpretation for every individual leader.
Yeah.
So we hear, be your authentic self all the time. And then a lot of the tips and a lot of the advice ends up trying to get us all to fit into the same, sort of shaped hole for every team and every leader. But what moves me is going to be different than what moves you. And the people who want to follow me as the leader probably are going to be different than the people who want to follow you to do something else. And some of this is amazing and good, and we're all trying to get better. But I love how it allows us. So I'm curious, does that mesh with what you're saying? Am I reading that correctly? That yes, leaders will find different stories are working for them versus somebody else, maybe even in the same role.
Yeah. So be your authentic self, but don't do that, right? Or don't do this. I think that's brilliant advice. I would, we work a lot with leaders who are trying to move and change organizations, and you'll see they've got a little bit of presenter envy. They'll look at people that somehow can manage the room and they want to be like that person. And I think that's a massive mistake. I mean, if you thought of probably one of the best presenters, showmen in a business sense in the last, century, it's Steve Jobs is the one that pops in most people's heads. But,
totally.
Not just 99% of people, 100% of people listening to this are not Steve Jobs. And so they shouldn't be trying to do things the way he did it. Now, take lessons from why you're paying attention to the things that Steve Jobs did. That's a good idea, because then you can think about how do you do it in your own way. And that's how you connect that to being your authentic self. So I read a story about Steve Jobs. He was basically sunsetting an old operating system and trying to get the whole developer base off the old operating system and onto the new one. And he held a funeral. Now, you may not be the kind of person that goes on stage and holds a funeral for the project that you want to sunset, but paying attention to why people paid attention to that, because it was a symbol, because it was a moment of relief where you could say, yeah, this thing was good, but now we need to move on to the next thing. That's how people can be authentically themselves. It's paying attention and then applying it in using your own words, essentially.
That's a helpful twist on something I'm guilty of. I think a lot of people are, looking at somebody and saying, I want to be like them. Like, well, actually, here's maybe the better way to look at that. Are there other mistakes in your 25 years working with other companies and leaders and seeing transformation land, and I'm sure seeing it not land sometimes? What other mistakes do you see leaders making when it comes to effectively, guiding people towards what they're hoping to achieve?
Yeah, I think a basic one and almost a near universal. Well, I'm gonna say story 1 and story 2 to you, and then remind me to come back to story 1 and story 2. But I'll give you a basic one in front of that.
Good teaser here.
So I think there's 2 mistakes that people that are very basic and almost universal. One is we use way too many acronyms and terms of art and words that make us sound big and sound important, and we really don't need to. Because most of the time, what we're trying to do is get people to do something. And the more we make them have to think about what we're saying, the more difficult that is. And every company has its own, set of acronyms and ways of talking. And you do it initially to fit in. And then you start to realize that, it's so coded that it's, what are we really talking about? Are we really talking about, we just want to go left? That's what we're talking about. But we shroud it in so many mystery and so many ABCs and so many acronyms. So, a big one for me is use the word use, don't use the word utilize. They mean the same thing. And why would you spend all those extra letters? So that's one piece. I think related to that is this myth that we are all rational decision makers. So if you want to be a serious business person, if you want to be proper, then it's what's the ROI on this? What's the return? How do I apply dollars and cents to this thing? And what are the pluses and minuses, the pros and cons? We're always trying to be rational, and that is not the way people make decisions. People make, according to Dan O'Reilly and other more studied people than I, we make irrational decisions all the time. So what we do is we actually we make a decision, and then we rationalize it afterwards. So in the book, I talk about this idea of a motive triangle: hope, fear, and reason. You actually need all 3 if you're persuading people to change. You need hope because that gives people something to move towards. You need fear because you want to move them away from something. And you need reason because they need to explain to other people why they're doing it. But if you just give them reason, which is typically what most business cases do, and most change management, which is another word I don't love, if you do change, it's all reason and rationale. And we need the reason and rationale because we need to explain it to other people, but that's not why we're doing it. So I think hope and fear are get rid of the big words and lean into the emotional side of how you're actually speaking to people.
I want to bring you back to story 1 and story 2, but first I'm very curious because I think I built a career that then allowed me to do some early major career transformation because finances weren't the priority anymore, just purely based off of an ability to walk into a room and disarm everyone. Mm-hmm. And when you describe people using all of these fancy words and wearing different outfits and coding so much of the business that we do, that really resonates. I'm like, yes. And when you disarm, everybody is immediately drawn in, conversations happen, and you get more real and build a relationship so much faster.
Yeah, absolutely. So
I'm curious then, why do we do it? I'm on the board of the Salvation Army, and I've got our big meeting coming up. Our board meeting happens once a quarter. everyone will be in a suit and tie, but none of them have jobs anymore. Most everyone is, retired. And we're just building this system that part of me wants to dismantle. And part of me goes, well, but what is it? What's helpful here? And is it disrespectful to not dress the way everybody's dressing and talk the way everyone's talking? How do you balance that? Why does it need to exist so that maybe just even personally, I don't accidentally offend everybody wherever I go?
I think, that's a really interesting question, and we could probably talk for hours about it. So I'll throw two words out: habit and culture. I think the reason we do all of that stuff is we learn to do it over time through osmosis, and then they become habits. I think culture is just a set of collective habits that each organization or each team tends to have, and it's how you fit in, it's how you feel part of the crowd. So the using of the big words is, you certainly, maybe you learn it at university because you went from a B minus to a B because you threw in a couple of big words, and that's
right.
Helped.
SAT
so
words.
That's probably the stepping stone to get you there. But you certainly continue it as you enter the corporate world. And I think I want to get everyone in the Salvation Army out of suits, even though they don't work. I think about change like this. I've only ever been rock climbing a few different times, but I do know a couple of things to be true. If you're rock climbing, the most comfortable thing is to be lower, especially if you're not a rock climber, really. The most comfortable thing is to be lower down, tied securely to something, and with your hands and feet placed gripping something. So you want your toes not dangling, and you want your hands tightly holding something. And then, okay, I'll move my hand, and then I will securely grab something, and then I'll move my foot, right? So you're only going to move one thing at a time. And I think when you look at most organizations, especially if you're an outsider to that organization or you're trying to help drive change, you want everyone to just take your feet and hands off the wall and see what happens. Well, most people are not going to do that because they're convinced that they're going to drop rather than go up, and they're probably right. So I think it's about change agents are good in an organization because they're the ones encouraging people to just reach for that next thing and do this next thing. But the best thing is to do it one at a time, because otherwise you'll paralyze people.
I love that. That's super, super helpful. Okay, you had teased us with story 1 and story 2.
Yeah. So very imaginatively named, I have to say. Yeah, I was talking to someone that's a CFO of a major organization, and we were talking about a change that was going on in the organization. And it dawned on me as we were just doodling on a whiteboard that you tend to get leaders that are really good at painting the picture of where we're going. And they get people excited. They do that hope and fear bit well, because we need to go to whatever this place. So, now the world is dominated by AI. We need to put AI everywhere. So there are some leaders that are really good at getting people all G'd up about, let's move to AI. Let's reinvent everything through AI. We're going to change our business model. That's story 2. That's the story about what we will be in the future. And then there are some leaders that are very good at story 1, which is, what are the changes we need to make today? So how do we get from A to B? They're not very good at describing what B is, because that's story 2. So you tend to, I think in all change situations, I've worked with leaders who are really good at story 2, and people get very excited. They're very enthusiastic. There's a ton of engagement, but it's fairly chaotic getting there because no one knows how, but the what and the where are well described. And then I've worked with other leaders who are really good at the how and the when. And there's a fair amount of disengagement because people feel disgruntled because they're being made to change, and they know how to and when to do it. They just don't know why and what we're going for. So I think story 1 and story 2. Story 2 is the destination, and story 1 is the journey. And you need to constantly describe both, especially if you're leading change.
Is there an altitude difference between story 1 and story 2. And by that, I mean, when I think of story 2, I feel, and maybe this is just where I'm naturally inclined, but like, I feel like it's at a pretty high altitude. Like this is what it'll look like. And then story 1 feels like it zooms way in to, okay, and here are the steps we're going to take. But that zoomed way in starts to look like, well, do we run into problems with micromanagement or not empowering the team to build their own steps to get to the change? Or I don't know if there's any altitude difference that's helpful. Do they end up at the same place, or should one be higher and lower than the other?
So the short answer is yes, there is a difference in altitude, but I wouldn't want people to say it's a set thing. And here's the reason I say that. Like, where are you based?
I'm in Atlanta.
In Atlanta, okay. And when you go over to the UK, where do you say you're from?
I'd say Texas, honestly, because that usually gets a fun reaction.
Okay. And so if you're in Atlanta and you meet someone in Atlanta, where do you say you're from?
A different place. I say I'm from Cumming. That's right. If someone knows this area, I'll be more specific.
And when you meet someone from Cumming, where do you say you're from? You start to give your address.
Okay. This is a good analogy.
So I think that's the problem with change, is we think we can say the story once and we're done. And okay, now we're going to go back to regular programming. It's a constantly evolving thing. I think with all stories evolve. And I think you should expect that, hope for that, and acknowledge that, because you've always got this Goldilocks problem of how does it fit for that person. You're always trying to move a group of people in a direction, and the clearer and more concrete and simpler you can make it for them, the better. But that unfortunately means there isn't just one story or one high altitude story and one low altitude story. It's a constant evolution in it, and the answer is it depends.
I love that, and I feel like that resonates as probably one of the big difference makers for incredible leaders, is that ability to recognize quickly at what level should I be telling this story, and kind of customize it to the moment, customize it to the audience.
I think you're so right. If you think about, the leadership piece is so underrated. So we, again, think about change, think about, okay, we're going to reorganize this whole company around AI, and we're going to change this business model, or whatever it is that you're doing. And, you say, okay, we're going to get someone in to help do change management. That's the problem with change management. It's basically project management against change. And so we're going to do some messaging. We got to do these bits here now. We're going to do these bits next. And it feels good because you've got a, multi-part, multi-line Gantt chart with a plan, and you can red, yellow, green it to death. And yeah, we're on top of this. But it's not how people go through change. You have to have leaders lead change. So if you're, to me, I think the learning, or the CLO, the chief learning officer in any organization, is a vastly underused person. And they're mostly set up in a very old way of, set up a kind of university, because I understand what a university is, and take people through courses and they're going to get better at leadership. But no, all organizations are going through change. Just happens to be right now it's accelerated, but it's not like it ever stops. So you're going through change. You want every leader to lead through change. That story about where are you from, Atlanta or Cummings or wherever you are, you can't have a centralized group that does that translation. You want leaders at every level of the organization, in every team, doing that translation of the strategy and going all the way through. And that's the storytelling that needs to happen to help drive the change, because then people are going to feel comfortable with it. And if you don't have people feeling comfortable with it, everyone has a safe mode. And their safe mode is, I'm just going to do what I did yesterday, because yesterday I did not get in trouble.
I love it. I think that resonates, and it kind of comes into that's a fear-based motivation, which is a fine motivation. I don't want to get in trouble, so I'm sticking with what we've always done.
Exactly.
This is an understandable reaction.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to, anytime I get the chance to talk with someone who is successful in creating and then managing their own business, especially for 25 years like you have, I feel like I'd be remiss to not take a few minutes of our remaining time here and ask you about what it's been like to lead your company through so much of its own change. I am sure that you have had to reinvent yourself and your company and your customers multiple times. And it would be really easy to hear all of your amazing tips and the experience and the stories that you're drawing on from this, those years, and forget some of the hard times as well. So can you humanize for a few minutes what it was like to start this company for folks who may be stuck, in quotes, in their corporate jobs, looking at somebody like you going, God, that's what I want. If I could just be my own boss and lead my own, that's the dream. Look, he's doing this successfully. Help me understand what that takes, though. What has that journey been for you?
Sure. Well, first of all, it's I have a title, but it's all the people that are on the journey with me, that are part of the team, that they are what make it fun and what make it work. So, right at the beginning of this, my dad used to tell me, he was a consultant many moons ago, and he used to tell me a story which he called the plight of the lonely consultant, which is essentially someone that leaves their big office job and they end up, hanging up their own shingle. And he basically said it goes like this: on Monday, you're going around looking for work, and you're calling people and you're figuring out, what could I do? You're marketing, you're doing your business development. On Tuesday, you're actually closing the deal of whatever it is you're selling. On Wednesday, you're getting ready to deliver that thing, and you're figuring out, how do I deliver it, and doing all the prep work and everything else. On Thursday, you deliver it. There's some genius moments. It's wonderful. The client loves it. The customer loves it. And you think, I need to make sure I do that again. So on Friday, you're writing down you're doing all the follow-up from the thing you did on Thursday. You're writing it all down. And then you're also saying, well, how do I do this to get better for next week? And then Saturday, Sunday is spent, doing the taxes and doing the accounting and doing all the billing and all the rest of the stuff that you didn't get time for during the week. And then it repeats. And it's pretty lonely. Now, I was really lucky enough to start this firm with Rose Fass, and she's the Fass in Fassforward. I like to think she's the Fass and I'm the forward, but that would not be that would not be correct. She is both the
It
Fass.
could just be insinuated, maybe.
Yeah, she's both the Fass and the forward in many ways. So we, and I think we started, I think like most consultants, we left Gartner at the same time, and a lot of our conversations with people were, what's your problem? And then roughly saying, well, we could help you with that. And over time, that's evolved into a business that is around transformation. It's around translating strategy. It's around shaping culture. But really, it's around these two pillars of leadership and storytelling. I think one of the biggest lessons is you've got to work with people that you like to work with. And I think that means both the clients and the people that you actually work with and bring onto the firm. Because if you don't do that, because it's going to be miserable at some point anyway, but it's just going to be more miserable if you have people that you just don't quite click with. It doesn't quite work. So we're very careful about who we bring on board. But we're also very careful about the clients that we work with as well, to be honest. No, we're lucky enough to be in a position we can do that.
Are you actually turning down
Say again?
business, or how does it look to be choiceful about your clients?
Because certainly in the type of work we do, you can have a lot of conversations with people, and they will. If you have that conversation slowly, it will eventually fizzle out. So that's roughly how it works.
Yeah. So you're looking for people who are moving at the same speed as you, and that usually is an indicator that this is going to be a mutually.
And you also want to go with people that want to work with you, because trying to force your way in, especially with what we do, which is helping companies lead change, there's a whole group of people out there that think they've got it and think they know exactly what they're doing, or think I'm just going to go and hire McKinsey because they know what they're doing. And, they should do that because that's what they think is the right thing.
Yeah. Well, it's clear your team is lucky to have such a smart, experienced, and humble leader like you, as well as your clients. We always end these conversations with the same question, which is, what parting piece of advice do you have? And there's no pressure, but this is the last episode of 99. So you're the final piece of advice for listeners of this podcast. But what comes to mind when you think about the conversation we've had and the things that you're helping leaders understand about storytelling? What do you want to leave us with?
It's funny. I don't know that this is so much. Maybe this is about the story you tell yourself. I think you want to be in a place. I don't know if this works for everyone. It works for me. You want to be in a place where you enjoy doing what you're doing. You enjoy doing it with the people you work with. And you want to be in a place where you feel like you're constantly learning and constantly growing. And I think a lot of that starts with the story you tell yourself. So if you've got to build that reinforcing loop, if you don't actively go out and seek to learn or seek to improve or seek to get better, you're effectively telling yourself, I don't learn, I don't get better. If you put up with people that you really don't want to put up with, you're effectively, sending that reinforcing signal. I think you've got to figure out the story you want to tell yourself and keep acting it.
That's powerful because you've put yourself, me, a listener, at the center of it. So you're what I hear is how much agency we have in the stories that we tell ourselves, which I think is a really powerful piece of advice, because it's easy to forget in a reorganization, in a downsizing, in a new job, in a new boss, in a new team member, in something happening that's human, that we don't control, and blaming that for the story or the problem or the benefit or the whatever. And really, there's much, much, much more agency. And it's a more helpful story to revolve around, well, who am I surrounding myself with? And how am I choosing to grow or learn, regardless of what's actually being put in front of me by the job or the manager or whatever it might be. I love it.
Absolutely.
Well, where can people find you if they want to connect? Obviously, your book is out and available, so we'll have that link in the show notes.
Yeah, the book is out and available. It's on Amazon. It's Barnes & Noble, all those kind of places. Fassforward is FASSFOR forward.com. It's not forward, but it's fastforward.com. And then I'm on LinkedIn. I don't think there's that many. There's a couple of other Gavin McMahons on LinkedIn, and I know them. So yeah, you can always
they
find me.
They can direct any misdirection, but I'll put a direct
they'll pass you on.
Yeah, it's a good system you got there. Well, again, thank you so much. We really appreciate you sharing your time and your wisdom with us. I really enjoyed the conversation.
No, thank you so much. It's great being the 99th human.
Absolutely. All right. Well, until next time.